All right, hello, welcome everyone to our latest ALTA Insights webinar. These are our free presentations we offer on important issues affecting title and settlement professionals. I'm Jeremy Yowie, ALTA's Vice President of Communications, and today we've got a great webinar lined up to discuss what's going on Capitol Hill. A real timely discussion as President Biden is scheduled to speak to a joint session of Congress tonight, just before his 100th day in office. Today's speakers are going to share information about ALTA's upcoming Advocacy Summit next month, which is going to be a great opportunity for everyone, for the industry to tell our story and meet your members of Congress and hear from some congressional leaders. Before starting, I do need to touch on a few housekeeping items. Everyone's lines are muted for the discussion. If at any time you have a question, please submit them in the questions box, and we'll hold some time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. As an added benefit, the webinar is being recorded. You'll get a link to the recording after we've edited the file. You'll get an email with a link to the recording, and you can always find all of our webinars at alta.org/webinars. That's alta.org/webinars. You can also download a copy of today's presentation from the handouts section. And before we get going, we do need to thank today's sponsor, Dell Technologies. And so before introducing the speakers, we have a short message from Dell to play.
We started with computers. We didn't stop at computers. We didn't stop at storage. We didn't stop at cloud. We didn't stop at wholly integrated intergalactic solutions. We kept going, working with our customers to enable the kind of technology that can guide an astronaut back to safety, or help make a hospital come to you instead of you going to it. And we didn't stop there. We're even working to make packaging that comes from waste instead of producing it. Because we saw a world that was full of challenges and ready for solutions. So when it comes to your business, you know we'll stop at nothing.
All right, there we go. All right, thank you, Dell. Now let me get to the speakers. Joining us first, we have Chris Morton, as ALTA Senior Vice President of Public Affairs. Chris leads our policy development, political engagement, and lobbying strategy. Chris, thank you for joining us today. And also with us is Leah Shimp Vass. Leah is ALTA's Director of Grassroots and Political Affairs. Leah develops ALTA's political action committee strategy and mobilizes our grassroots activities. And with that, Chris and Leah, I'll turn the presentation over to the both of you.
Thanks, Jeremy. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I want to talk a little bit about ALTA's upcoming Advocacy Summit. This year it's virtual and it's free, so I hope everyone has signed up already. It's May 18th through the 20th. We will have programming every day, and then our Hill virtual meetings with your members of Congress will be split up by region over 3 days. So like I said, I hope everyone has signed up and is ready to talk about the title industry. We are split up on 3 days, as I said. The first day on Tuesday will be the East Coast and the Southeast. On Wednesday, the Midwest and the South. And on May 20th, Thursday, the West Coast. Again, please sign up. We're really looking forward to this. We already have over 300 people signed up. We will be doing some training on each day, including how to do a virtual meeting. I know you all have been doing virtual meetings for a year, but we want to get into specifics for how this will go for Capitol Hill. We have our friend Nick DeSarno from the Public Affairs Council, who does trainings for advocates across DC regularly, and he'll be leading our training. It'll be not only how to make sure you know how to use Zoom, but also how to do these Hill meetings virtually, how to make the ask, how it's different from when we would normally do these in person, all the things you need to know to make the meeting effective and to make sure that you're comfortable. We will also have a training on the issues. Our main ask is going to be the Secure Notarization Act, which I think most of you are familiar with. How to use remote online notarizations and the reasons that we need it to be a federal law, because only 34 states have laws right now. And it'll also be about telling our story. Obviously, that's something we've been talking about for the last year, but it's really a way to tell your members of Congress what you do every day in the title industry, and especially how we've pivoted in the last year from doing in-person closings to online closings to drive-through closings. Basically, you guys have done everything you possibly can to make sure closings happen every single day. And telling that story is so effective. It's something that sticks with members of Congress and their staff. And many of them that we've spoken to over the last year did their own refinancing or their own, buying their own new house. So they've experienced this as well, and they know how important it is. So we're going to make sure you guys know the nuts and bolts of the Secure Notarization Act and that you are telling an effective story. I want to highlight the speakers for the Advocacy Summit. We have a great array of folks coming to speak to us. On Tuesday, we have our friend Congressman Ed Perlmutter from Colorado. He's a personal friend of Bill Birding. They used to work together, and Bill will actually be interviewing him about his work on the Financial Services Committee and all of his thoughts on what's going on Capitol Hill this year. On Wednesday, we are going to have two former senators, John Breaux from Louisiana and Trent Lott from Mississippi. They're going to give us their insights on the new Congress, on President Biden and his administration. They also have great insights on President Biden because they worked with him for many years when he was a senator. So that'll be really interesting, and they're just really fun to listen to. They've got great stories. I think you'll really enjoy them. And then on Thursday, we have a new member of Congress, Congresswoman Young Kim from California. She was a small business owner, and for many years, she was a congressional staffer. So she has a very unique perspective on what's going on Capitol Hill. I was a congressional staffer myself, and I can't even imagine actually serving as a member. So I think it'll be really interesting to hear from her. She also serves on the Small Business Committee and is one of just 3 Korean American women to be elected to Congress. So she has such a unique story, and we can't wait to hear from her. Finally, we will have a tie pack event, because it wouldn't be Advocacy Summit without a tie pack event. If you're interested, please let me know. It's an evening with the International Spy Museum. Since we can't be in person and do a real DC experience, we wanted to bring a virtual DC experience to our tie pack donors, and it should be a lot of fun. So if you're interested, please let me know.
Thanks, Leah. So before I jump into a little bit about where we are in the environment, as you think about coming to Advocacy Summit, I just want to reinforce some of the points that Leah said about the opportunity that's in front of us and some of the context around the meetings themselves. Obviously, as Leah said, it's a little different this year from a virtual perspective, but I think we've experienced a number of meetings with members of Congress and staff during this past year, and found them to be even more productive than face-to-face conversations because of the focus and the attention and time that they have and the ability to see you across the screen. So take the most advantage of it. I mean, I think this is a super exciting lineup that we've got, both speakers and the fact that, you know, with Leah and the team's good work, we've got the chance to break a record in terms of number of meetings that ALTA's ever had on Capitol Hill during Advocacy Summit. Despite the fact that it's virtual, I think it's an auspicious time for us to be up there. The thing I'll say just contextually about the meetings, they will be, you know, focused and short. I think, you know, we can expect 15, 20 minutes sort of to think about this, 30 at the max. As Leah said, we will have a prep session, so we'll make sure that you understand not only the mechanics of the process with Zoom, but also do's and don'ts and other tips to make it the most successful, as well as walking you through sort of the framework of what an agenda of a good meeting looks like. The other thing I'll say is, you know, we've got an environment now as it relates to the legislative landscape that is constantly shifting and changing. Obviously, a new president, a new administration, and a Democratic lineup across the board in Congress, and they're being very bold in what they're putting forward. We've moved from the stage of recovery and from relief to recovery with the COVID package that passed early on this year, $1.9 trillion of investment that was put forward on the back of all of the COVID relief from the last year in 2020. And now we've moved into two packages that are on the table that will be most top of mind for members of Congress and staff. The American Jobs Plan, which is a $2.3 trillion proposal for investments in both hard infrastructure, as well as now today being released, the American Families Plan, which is another $1.8 trillion for needs like education, caregiving, healthcare, and other investments that the administration is pursuing. All told, between relief and recovery, we're looking at $6 trillion of additional investment and spending that is being proposed here, a significant amount. And the thing that we all should be aware of is in exchange for some of those investments, there will be a number of potential tax increases on the table. For the first infrastructure package, the American Jobs Plan, some of the big proposals include raising the corporate rate from 21 to 28%. For this families plan that just came out and the president will speak to tonight before a joint session of Congress, there are a number of additional tax changes, including we just learned a proposal that would alter the current tax treatment of 1031 exchanges to cap deferral on gain at $500,000 in those exchanges. And so obviously that proposal is not something that we would support. And we've been doing a lot of meetings with members on the Hill to talk about the value of that tool and the importance of preserving that provision. The bottom line here is we're not anywhere near the finish line. There will be a lot of discussion and debate about the parameters, both on the spending and investments, as well as the taxes. Things like the state and local tax deduction is something that many Democratic members of Congress want reinstated to previous law and not the cap that is on it now as a result of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. And in the infrastructure plan, there's also a whole title on housing investment, $213 billion that are being proposed to rehab both multifamily housing as well as single family housing for us. And we'll have to look at things like, you know, potential federal grant programs and lien requirements and other things put on those. So there's a lot of dialogue and debate to take place. the thing I would say in the context of that environment is just to be aware that we're at the beginning of the process. And as Leah said, the biggest thing we can do in terms of being successful for this meeting is to tell the story of the value of what you do, the contributions that our industry provides, not only in terms of jobs and wages for the industry and economic impact for housing, but also how you have pivoted during COVID in this last year to innovate, to really serve the customers on the ground, particularly through things like the use of remote online notarization. If we tell our story, which is a strategic priority of us at ALTA, well, and we leave those clear examples with members of Congress and staff, it will be a successful fly-in. And we will have the benefit of then leveraging all of that great storytelling to promote more co-sponsorship for the Secure Notarization Act, which will be our main ask, as well as to defend things like 1031 exchanges and the tax treatment there. So that's the big message I would leave all of you with as it relates to thinking about the context within which we're entering this. Some of the other items I would just note as we think about the legislative environment. A week ago, on Monday, April 19th, the House passed the Safe Banking Act, which is another important piece of legislation that we've all been supporting at ALTA and through the membership to limit the liability of those of us in the business who are doing or want to do business with cannabis entities around the country, particularly in states that have legalized the use of cannabis. That's an important piece of legislation that will and is spearheaded by Congressman Perlmutter, so we'll get him at the summit to talk a little bit about what he thinks the prospects of that bill will be long-term. But that's another piece of context I think to keep in mind as we enter into our May fly-in. Another issue just to be aware of is, you know, the incidence obviously of wire transfer fraud over the last year has increased over 2,000 additional cases according to the IC3 report from 2020, upwards of $213 million in losses as it relates to wire transfer fraud. And we are working now with various partners, as we have over the last couple of years, to promote awareness amongst policymakers of the need to both educate consumers on the importance of protecting themselves from wire transfer fraud, but also to collect the data appropriately and report that data to congressional committees of jurisdiction so that they have a fuller picture of the scope of this problem and can have discussion and dialogue about any additional policy tools and levers that can be pulled to better help consumers. So we're continuing to talk to appropriators about making sure, as we've done the past couple of years, of raising that visibility and putting various report language into appropriations reports and requiring federal agencies to put that data before congressional committees. So that's another important piece of information to know. ALTA just recently, as part of its wire fraud exercise, did a podcast. Diane Tom participated in that, our CEO, with the AARP as part of its fraud prevention efforts. And so many of you may have seen some of the work we did there in the conversation. Tom Cronkite, one of our members, also spoke to his work with Certified, making sure that all of our title companies and others in the business are doing the right thing by consumers. So those are, you know, additional kinds of stories to tell as you think about some of the important work we're doing. And I would be I'd be remiss also if I didn't mention that, you know, as you are thinking about our industry and communicating with legislators, the other important thing to talk about is how you're giving back. So many of you during the pandemic talked about and shared with us the stories of your good deeds. We started the hashtag Good Deeds program, where we highlighted all of the great charitable work, donations of time and money and effort that you all have given back in your communities. And that led ultimately to the Good Deeds, ALTA Good Deeds Foundation, under the leadership of Mary O'Donnell and Diane and the board of ALTA. And we now have great stories to tell. We've given out 21 grants, upwards of $125,000 distributed to needy organizations nationwide. And we've raised almost $600,000. And so those things are impactful as well to share with your members of Congress, so they know we're not just there asking for things that we need for our business, but we're also providing their constituents not only with service through the work we do, but also doing the right thing by the people who we live next to and work with. So, so that's something just to put in your toolkit as you think about this great opportunity we have in front of us to fly in virtually to Washington and meet with staff and legislators. The other thing I'll just conclude with before we go to questions, and welcome folks to ask any questions about the Advocacy Summit, about the issues that we're working on. Put those in the chat box. We're happy to talk through answers on that. But even if you meet with staff on the Hill, I know sometimes everyone is very excited to meet with the members of Congress. They're extremely busy, particularly these times with all that's going on Capitol Hill and the virtual nature of work. Staff is just as important. As Leah said, we have a former staffer in Young Kim who's speaking to us, who is now a member of Congress. I think there's over 100 former staff who are now members of Congress. And so they are just as important to convey your story and make your asks too, in terms of the work that we're doing. So with that, Jeremy and Leah, I'll stop and happy to open it up for questions. And Leah, if you have any other thoughts to share, please do as well.
Yeah, Chris, Leah, thank you for the great insight on what's happening at the federal level, it impact our members, and also the preview of what to expect at Advocacy Summit. Chris did mention the good deeds recipients. Everyone who received a grant this first round will be highlighted in the May Title News, so keep an eye out for that in the next couple of weeks. And he also mentioned Tom Cronkite and efforts to raise awareness about wire fraud. Tom's going to lead a discussion in June on an ALTA Insights webinar. We're going to have folks from the FBI and Secret Service. And the goal is going to be, how can the industry work more closely with the government to, at the end of the day, to protect the money involved in transactions. So keep an eye out for registration for that webinar. In the meantime, please submit your questions here. Got one from Amy. Just popped in. She wants to know if we will be meeting with our legislators in a group with our state LTAs. Is it going to be kind of the same setup as in years past? Leah?
Yes, we are going to group everyone by state. You're not obligated to go to every meeting, but we are hopeful that you'll at least go to see your 2 senators and your representative, but you're welcome to go to all of the meetings. You will have a Zoom link for all of those meetings.
And you'll have the training, so kind of what to expect, the proper Zoom etiquette, right? You want to have,
Right.
You want to be presentable and close anything else that might be distracting. Tell the dog to be quiet.
Sure, definitely shut your door like I just did, so my 2 dogs don't interrupt. And mute yourself unless you're speaking. I mean, I think you all know this, but I always need a reminder. And also know that the member of Congress and their staff are probably in the same position as you are with interruptions. So occasionally their cameras might be turned off. It's nothing personal. It's sometimes because they're in a very tiny office with a lot of people and a lot of commotion going on. So all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, and I would just add a couple of things to be mindful of. I think, sometimes questions will come back from the member of Congress or staff. I think if you don't know the answer to a question that they're asking, I would not make something up or sort of, find yourself moving into a space you weren't comfortable. You can always thank them for a question that they have and assure them that we on the team will get back to them with particular information if you don't have it at hand. So that's one important thing. I think the other important thing too, since these are official legislative meetings, that's always important is don't talk about politics or fundraising in these meetings. It's really important. There's a strict separation between those things, and we all want you to, really focus on policy matters at hand.
So are these members of Congress, are they in their offices on Capitol Hill, or some back, home, or, what's kind of going to be the setting that we're going to expect from them?
Yeah,
I think most of them will be in the office. They're in session that week. That's part of why we picked this week, is that they'd be in DC, virtually meeting with constituents and voting. And I believe that most of the staff are also in the office at this point. There might be some who are also working from home.
Yeah, and I think, we should expect different backgrounds and those kinds of things. We may expect also, and don't be offended if a staff person or a member is not on camera. Oftentimes, if they're taking these calls in a car while they're in transit, or or they're in a place where the lighting or other things are not particularly effective, they may turn their camera off. So just be mindful of that. It still remains the same terrific opportunity to have that dialogue as we would in the olden days on the phone. But you may encounter some of those dynamics, and just be flexible because we all obviously are dealing with a lot of different circumstances.
Yeah, I know, like in live, when we met in person, we always had to be flexible because things come up. There could be a vote, and oftentimes you kind of feel rushed. What's kind of been your experience, over the past year of meeting with members of Congress? It is a little bit more, slower pace, and they're paying a little bit maybe more attention, or or are they still busy? Maybe what can people expect as far as just kind of the cadence and the feel of a meeting?
Yeah, maybe I'll start, Leah, and you can add some perspective. But as I said at the outset, Jeremy, I think, from my perspective at least, I found them to be really effective tools, to have meetings through Zoom or whatever, other platforms that we've all used. But these meetings will be Zoom meetings. And I think it's because there is, there's more time and attention available for those members. Even if the meetings are themselves short, you have more of their full attention. There's not people running in and out of the room necessarily. They're not being interrupted, as much by staff who are, hovering over them. And you're not in the office with a bunch of other people from other organizations who are having fly-ins. So I think it's a real great tool, and I imagine, Leah and I have talked about this, I imagine we're going to keep using this for a variety of reasons, interspersed with when we get back to live exercises.
Yeah, Chris, I agree. I think they've been a really effective tool, and even if it's a short meeting, it has been very effective. Jumping on camera and introducing yourself as a constituent and telling them what you do and that where you're located. They know that you're part of their community, and that's always very effective way to get your point across. Is I live in the same town as you, and I service your constituents. I closed on all of their real estate transactions, and this is what's working for us and what isn't. So it's always effective. I do want to say one more thing. You guys are going to get calendar invites for all of these meetings. It will have the Zoom link in it. It will also have a one-pager on your state and the title industry, and it'll have a one-pager on the Secure Notarization Act. So you'll have that at your fingertips if there's any information you're forgetting, or just want to refresh, before or during the meeting. You'll have it at your fingertips. And sometimes those meeting times will change. So just pay attention if you get an updated calendar invite. As Jeremy said, sometimes things get crazy on the Hill. There are votes. Sometimes there are 5 or 6 votes in a row. And if a member of Congress wants to keep the meeting with the constituents, they'll ask if we can move it around. So we're going to do our best to accommodate all of those requests. And if we can't, if something changes, you would be meeting with the staff. But like Chris pointed out, sometimes staff end up being members of Congress. But also, I would say when I worked on the Hill, my boss always told us that we were all little senators and we spoke for him. So remember that a lot of these staff, they are representing the member of Congress that they work for. And what they say is what their boss would say to you. So it's just as important to talk to the staff.
And one of the things too, in addition to the leave behind materials that Leah mentioned on our industry, national and state figures on jobs and employment and wages, as well as secure, is we'll provide everyone who's attending with a suggested framework for the agenda of the meeting. That's just, how you flow and walk through that meeting, introduce yourself, tell a little bit about the industry and ALTA, talk about the last year and tell your story about what you've done during the pandemic to serve customers, and then finish with the ask of supporting and co-sponsoring the Secure Notarization Act when introduced. So you'll have that available to you so that you can reference it, as well as any FAQs around the Secure Notarization Act. So that'll be for your use, and the leave behind materials will be shared with the offices, so they'll have that.
Yeah, I know our advocacy team, you guys go to great lengths to get our people prepped and to feel as comfortable as they can in these meetings. Leah, I cut you off. You were going to say something.
Oh, it's okay. I just also wanted to say there will be an ALTA staffer in each of these meetings. So if there's a technical problem, if you guys have questions, there will be somebody like me or Chris or Jeremy in the meeting to make sure everything's running smoothly, and also to take notes. And if there are things that need to be followed up on, they will be taking care of that. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that. We also will have state captains or state leaders, who will probably be the person who kicks off the meeting. And you'll be doing a little state delegation meeting before you virtually go to the Hill. So everyone will be on board with everything for your state, and kind of take your cues from that state leader. That's probably a person who's been in these meetings many, many times. So if you have questions or you have nerves, they're a great resource for you.
And Leah, you may have mentioned it and I missed it. How long are these meetings typically going to be scheduled for? Is it a half hour, 15 minutes?
I would say in the past, when we're in person, we usually have a half an hour. And I think what we've been told is they're more likely to be 15 to 20 minutes because these members are getting crazy demands of their time now that everything is virtual. I think everyone has realized how much easier it is to get a meeting. So there's a little more demand on their time.
Yeah. And, Chris had mentioned the importance of telling your story, and yeah, just be authentic. You work in, or you have an office in their jurisdiction. Just talk about your company. How many offices do you have? How many employees do you have? Maybe, how many home sales you helped over the past year during the pandemic, refinances, things that you helped generate, taxes or job employment in your district. It goes a long way. And these conversations always have funny wrinkles, and they'll be talking and, oh, so and so, and they're like, oh yeah, that's my aunt, or she was my teacher. And it's those conversations that then, just bring it back to people, and humanity, and really make that connection. So, don't think, that, okay, you're not, a lobbyist, you don't have experience on Capitol Hill. It's okay. You are representing the industry and you're representing your community. So, just be authentic, be yourself, and, share how you serve the community.
Yeah, Jeremy, I think that's a great point. And I think, the goal, in addition to sharing that story, is we want these policymakers and staff to consider you a resource, so that when they have questions or issues that arise, they will reach out, or they'll reach out to us because they remembered you coming through their office. And we're trying to build real awareness and relationships. These things don't happen just one time. We have to do it over and over again. A wise person once told me that lobbying and advocacy is about addition and repetition. And I think it's really important that you establish yourself as that resource so that they can rely on and trust you just like your customers do.
Yeah, and the repetition, we've been there on the doors talking about title insurance and the policies, and frankly, you probably don't want to get in that conversation too much. Talk about how you serve the customers in your community. That's what's going to resonate the most. So you don't have to worry about talking about the different type, the owner's policy, the lender's policy.
One of the things to that point, just so people have an awareness of this, we recently conducted a survey of some of our policy influencers and staff in Washington to ask them just about our industry. And one of the things that really came to the fore, and Jeremy's been involved in this as well, is the fact that the words protection and peace of mind and security and all the things that are critical components of what you all do every day to provide that guarantee of property rights to consumers are things that really, really resonate. And so talking in those terms, I think, is what really I think we want to convey as we have these discussions.
Yeah, and Chris, to your point, we did this survey of congressional leaders. Back in 14 or 15, we did a consumer survey and in focus groups, and the same words that we tested then to consumers resonated the same with members of Congress. Protecting property rights. That core thing of what we do hasn't really changed. So as long as you continue, to emphasize that, you'll be on the right path. So we asked if we have the schedule on the website. It is the speakers, and I believe, but maybe the latest speakers might not have been added yet, but meetings.alta.org/advocacy summit should have the nearly latest information on the schedule, correct?
Yeah, the agenda for the event is up. I think we may have not added Bro and Lot yet to the speaker list, but everyone else is on there. And as Leah said, your individual meetings will be delivered to you directly.
All right. Joe Powell.
One more thing before we jump off. Everyone is welcome to attend every morning of programming. If you want to hear all three speakers, please join us Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. It doesn't matter if you have Hill meetings or not. And I know there are also some people who are opting not to do the Hill meetings. So they're just coming for programming, but please attend anything that you're able to. I think it'll be worth your time.
A few more questions, if you don't mind, Chris and Leah, before we wrap
Sure.
up. Over the past year, you've been having Zoom meetings with members of Congress, different types of advocacy. Maybe if you could just share, how has it changed advocacy efforts? Has it made it easier? Is it harder to actually, make your ask and actually get to the goal line, or just maybe share a little bit of your experience of the past year?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the actual discussion itself, I find, is, as I said before, much more focused, and it's a great opportunity. The thing that's challenging for all of us is, we're all fatigued by Zoom, and finding the time in our day to do one more call like this becomes challenging, or it's something that we sort of want to push off. I would just say that the more of these we do, the better, because they've been impactful. We've revealed relationships that we didn't know some of our members had with staff or members of Congress, like you mentioned, Jeremy, common friends and those kinds of things. And we've also, I think, realized that there's some members of Congress or staff who have direct experience either with our business, having worked in it or known somebody in the business, or just through the process of closing on their home. And so it's not until you do those kinds of things that you understand that. So the more we do it, the more we will find these connections, and the more connections we have at the end of the day, the more successful our advocacy will be.
Leah, anything you want to add on that?
I mean, I don't know if I can add too much, but I think Chris is exactly right. I know everyone's exhausted from everything being virtual, but these meetings have definitely been worth it. We've, just like when you're in person, we've been able to establish a rapport with a lot of these members that we didn't have relationships with. And I mean, we even found out that Senator Jerry Moran from Kansas was a notary himself. So, and we were able to get him on the Secure Act last year because he really understood it. So things like that are totally worth your time. I mean, and we've heard from several members who refinanced and were able to do it virtually, and they were so appreciative of that process. So I think everybody knows somebody who's refinanced or closed on a house this year, and just reminding them of the need to be remote, they get it, and just, they're people too. So that it's really important.
Speaking of remote, I'm not sure if Leah or Chris, you guys have met in person yet. I have not met either of you in person.
No, I've met two people that work at ALTA in person. That's it.
The year of COVID, for sure.
A couple more questions, and then we'll wrap up. Chris, the census results came in, and going to affect Congress a little bit, especially those states, Texas, Florida, Arizona, ending up with fewer House representatives than projected. How do you think that will affect advocacy?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say this, and I'd also love Leah's perspective on this, but the Democrats have narrow margins to begin with. Obviously, we're tied in the Senate, and in the House, it's just a handful of votes that they've got to get a majority on legislation. But they're going to have a challenge regardless in a midterm election with the president of their party and keeping the Congress. I think the redistricting, which seems to favor some of those areas and states that they aren't necessarily as competitive in, makes that job even harder. And so we'll see how it all plays out, but I don't think it helps them at the end of the day.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it really shows that state legislatures really matter too. I mean, if you look at where the changes are going to be made, these states that gained seats, most of them are Republican-controlled legislatures. So they are drawing the maps, and unless they have some sort of law, like in my home state of Iowa, where it has to be nonpartisan, it's going to be very interesting, and it will affect the way Congress is made up for the next 10 years. And I mean, New York State lost a seat because but if it had 89 more people fill out a census form, they would not have lost a seat. So that, I mean, just right there, that tells you so much. So it's going to be a very interesting year and leading into the midterm elections for sure. And obviously that's something I'm watching really closely.
Yeah, I believe Ohio's losing one as well. I didn't actually,
Mhm.
I've only focused on who's losing. I didn't see actually what states.
Yeah, Ohio, it's mostly the Rust Belt states that lost and the Sun Belt states that gained. So very interesting. It also is affecting like people who are retiring, like, or running for a different office. Like in Ohio, for example, I think Congressman Tim Ryan expected that maybe he would lose his seat to redistricting, and now he's running for Senate. So those are other things for you guys to watch. Who's going to retire because of they might get districted into a place where there's already an incumbent and they don't want to run against that person in a primary. All those sorts of things that makes changes the dynamics of Congress.
The ripple effect. I mean, in Ohio, we have Steve Stivers who's retiring. So, yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's wrap up on one more question. You know, organization near and dear to our industry, the CFPB. Maybe shed a little light on the timeline for the confirmation hearing for Rohit Chopra, Biden's nomination to serve as the Bureau's director.
Yeah, so he came out of the banking committee a few weeks back on a tie vote. Under the current rules of the Senate, tie votes are allowed to advance to the floor. Obviously, that indicates where the parties stand on his nomination. Evenly split, at least in committee. I expect it'll be also a partisan vote on the floor and potentially a 51 vote threshold with the vice president breaking the tie on his nomination. The CFPB, I don't need to say this, but is not is a controversial agency, and it will only be more so, I think, in this administration. Chopra himself, I think, at least in his nomination hearings, said that he's interested in hearing and learning from various industries, and so we're going to take him at his word. And we plan to not only send a letter outlining our industry and our issues to him, but also then try to find some time to go in and schedule some meetings once he's confirmed. I think it's probably going to be at least a few weeks, another month at the earliest, before we see that move forward, but it will. And then the agenda, I think, near term is going to be focused on COVID, and all of the programs, COVID programs and support mechanisms that have been put in place, and making sure that compliance is happening there. And other issues like payday lending, student loan forgiveness, other kinds of things are going to be more priority for CFPB before they even kind of move down the chain and start thinking about things that might impact us directly.
Yeah, I think they just postponed enforcement of the QM rule, yesterday or this morning. So maybe no enforcement actions as far as RESPA compliance. We will actually have a webinar coming up next month that's going to be focusing on JVs and MSAs. So that'll be May 12th. So mark your calendar for that. We'll be sending out registration links for that soon as well. Anything else, Chris, Leah, you want to share before wrapping up? Or otherwise, if you missed parts of today's webinar, or if you think others in your office would benefit from listening, as I mentioned, it is being recorded, and you'll get an email with a link to the recording tomorrow. And do want to thank Dell Technologies once again for sponsoring today's webinar. So thank you, Dell. Otherwise, Leah, Chris, thank you for your time. We hope to see you in a few weeks at our virtual ALTA Advocacy Summit.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks, Leah.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you. Take care, everyone.